In order to understand what is happening now in Ukraine, I would suggest that you put off emotions. Emotions get in the way when you want to talk about serious things. With your permission, I will take a pen in order to draw a picture. What have our geopolitical opponents been doing for a long time? They have been using a particular approach. Look, the year 1949, India. Thanks to the victory of the Soviet Union in the Second World War, our British partners had to leave India. Of course, the Indian people did fight for their freedom themselves, but this fight could have continued for many more years if the Soviet army did not enter Berlin in 1945, and more importantly, did not enter Northern Korea and establish Soviet presence in that region. In this situation, the British had to show that they supported equal rights and freedom, and so they finally left India. But how did they leave it? They divided this country into two parts. That is how Pakistan was created. For your information, a country named Pakistan had never been there. It is an artificially created country, and the name Pakistan was made up by Hindu students who studied in London. So the country was divided according to religious views. Hindu people were supposed to stay in India, and Muslims were supposed to move to Pakistan. The population got mingled, which resulted in lots of family tragedies. Well, now let's see what happened in terms of politics. They created India, an anti-India, named Pakistan. When the West loses some territory, it creates an anti-territory and plays off one against another. They begin to support terror groups, small conflicts, and so on and so forth. The same thing we can say about China. There had been a civil war since 1946, which lasted up to 1949, 3 years. The Soviet Union supported Mao Zedong, and the West supported Chiang Kai-shek. Mao Zedong wins. So what did the West do? They created anti-China. How? They evacuated the remaining troops of Chiang Kai-shek to the island of Formosa and named it Taiwan. Again, now we have China and anti-China. We can find many other examples from the history. Let us stick to the point. The year 2011, Russia. What did they do? They supported the so-called opposition, White Ribbons, the Bolotnaya Square, and so on. They were staggering in most of the political parties in Russia at that time. The country was on the edge of upheaval. Fortunately, it ended well. Putin became a president. The West lost control of the situation. So what could they do? They created anti-Russia. Where? In Ukraine. As soon as Putin became president, they understood that they would not be able to overthrow Russia from the inside, so they began to place their stake on Ukraine. They were planning to do it in 2015, but Yanukovych speeded up the process by turning away from Europe. That is why the mutiny happened to be so bloody, because they wanted to create anti-state. Meanwhile, they began to bawl and squall that it was all Russia's fault. What for? You can see it if you look at the things carefully. The West creates anti-state, equips it with arms, shovel big money into the country, and then, hopefully, make them go against Russia. So, after the mutiny, the West began to prepare Ukraine for the war with Russia. Is Ukraine weaker than Russia? Of course it is, but it is not as small as some tiny Luxembourg. Ukraine's population exceeds 40 million people. If the West manages to equip them and fund them properly, they may cause a perfect conflict with Russia. But what is important to understand, the West do not need Ukraine to win this war. They just want this war to begin. For the American government, the more Ukrainians and Russians kill each other, the better. That is what they plan to do. In this situation, what happens next? In Ukraine, there appear people who disagree with what is going on in Kiev. Here we have Donbass and Lugansk. We can call them anti-Russia. If Ukraine played the role of anti-Russia, then LNR and DNR act against this scenario. The method is the same. The difference is that DNR and LNR came up by themselves. After the rise of these new republics, we certainly want to help them. Why? Because while DNR and LNR are in Ukraine, they immobilize the West from the described scenario. While Donbass people are fighting for Donbass, it is impossible to organize a war between Ukraine and Russia. If you look carefully, you will see what is happening in reality. Kiev keeps crying that Russia attacked Ukraine, that Russian troops crossed the Ukrainian borders, and at the same time, Kiev does not declare military emergency, does not break off diplomatic contacts, and keeps trading with Russia, buying coal and gas. Can you imagine the Soviet Union trading with Hitler during the war? Now, what are the conclusions? Again, let us put off all the emotions. If we do not prevent Americans from creating an anti-Russia, this anti-Russia will definitely go against Russia. What will be the trigger for the conflict? Crimea. That is why, out of pure pragmatic reasons, we cannot let down Donetsk and Lugansk. Now the second important issue. Can Russia recognize the independence of Donetsk and Lugansk? If we do it, then the Western scenario will work again. That is why, no matter how strange it may sound, but in terms of Russian interests in the region, LNR and DNR have to stay in Ukraine. It is like a weight piece on Ukraine's leg. That is why our Minister of Foreign Affairs declares that we advocate territorial integrity of Ukraine. That is why we want Kiev and Donbass to negotiate. The American economy is not in its best condition at the moment. Nevertheless, they have to support the most part of Ukraine, and Russia has to support just a small part of it, which is about 3-4 million people. That is why, when you understand the rules of the geopolitical games, you begin to realize what can be done and what not. But in Russia, we have many hot-headed patriots who do not understand it. It is like winning a battle and winning the whole war. One should understand the difference. That is why people of DNR and LNR are not fighting just for their homes. They are fighting for 40 million Ukrainians who do not understand that without DNR and LNR, the citizens of Ukraine will be dragged into a conflict with Russia. The number of casualties will be counted in hundreds of thousands or millions. Today, Donetsk and Lugansk are fighting both for Russia and Ukraine. That is why I will repeat that if you want to understand the geopolitical situation, put off your emotions and then start analyzing. In this case, emotions do not do any good.